All right, welcome fifth grade to Virtual Math 101. All right, so for this week, we're going to be focusing on OA 2.3. And you can see here, there are four main parts to OA 2.3. The first part is to generate two numerical patterns using two given rules. Now, this is going to be quite simple. First, you see the word generate. The word generate pretty much means to create. So we're going to create two patterns. And we're going to be creating these by using two given rules. And once you see the examples, this is going to be pretty easy to go through. The second part, which we'll focus on another day, is identify apparent relationships between corresponding terms. But we're not going to focus on that right now. We're going to focus on the two green parts. The second part of this, after we generate two numerical patterns, is we're going to form ordered pairs. And they're going to be consisting of corresponding terms. Now, ordered pairs, if you remember, are your X and your Y, and they form a point. Just like in class when we played Battleship, ordered pairs are your X and your Y coordinates. So based on these two numerical patterns, we're going to form ordered pairs, and they're going to consist of corresponding terms. So they're going to consist of terms that are related. Like you're going to have a set of one set, two sets, three sets, and the ones that are related are corresponding terms. And finally, at the end, we're going to be graphing these ordered pairs. So as we go through these examples today, just make sure we're focusing on generating these patterns and understanding that they form ordered pairs. All right, so here's our first example. And the directions are going to be very similar to this. Create patterns using two given rules. So our patterns are clearly stated here. We have a pattern A and we have a pattern B. And your two given rules are going to be your directions. So the first rule is start at 2 and add 3. And the second rule is start at 5 and add 3. So what you're going to learn throughout math is, especially when you get to graphing and patterns and things like that, the best tool you can use is a T-chart. So on here, I'm going to draw a T-chart, which looks just like a T. So don't let it confuse you. All right, so when we usually do any kind of patterns and graphing, we like to stay in alphabetical order. So I'm going to label this one A, and I'm going to label this one B for our two patterns. And our patterns here are going to go down. Now, you may see some that go sideways, but they still mean the same thing. It's just a T-chart sideways, but pattern A and pattern B. So let's look at these rules. So the first rule is start at 2. So make sure, that is very important, make sure you're starting at 2. And very simply, the second part of that rule is add 3. So if we start at 2 and add 3, we're going to add 3 to this 2. So we're going to go to 5 because we added 3. We're going to go to 8 because we added 3. We're going to go to 11. And then finally, we're going to go to 14. Now, what I like to do is I always like to have 5 numbers in my pattern. Now, the rule as you advance through math is going to be the rule of 3. Make sure you have at least 3 numbers in your pattern. But I like to go to 5 to be safe. And that's going to help you when we get to the next part of the standard. All right, so pattern B is start at 5 and add 3. So we're going to start at 5. That's the first number. And then we're going to add 3 to these. So that's 8, 11, that's 14, and this one's going to be 17. I'm going to extend my T-chart just a little bit. So we have our two patterns that we created using two given rules. Now, I want to explain the second part of that pattern. If you look at these right here, if you notice, they line up across from each other. There's a matching number across from it. And if you see these two, since they're the first term, the second term, the third term, these are called corresponding terms because they're related. They're right next to each other. So each of these are corresponding. And if you pay attention here, these two numbers, the first row, which is pattern A, if you were to graph these, represents your X axis or the X coordinate. And the second one represents your Y coordinate. And with these, we can create ordered pairs that we can graph. And we made the reference back to Battleship in the previous part. So the first pattern is your X, and the second pattern is your Y. And these corresponding terms that are next to each other create ordered pairs. So I can also write these as 2, 5, and I can graph that. I can write these as 5, 8, 8, 11, then we have 11, 14, and then we have 14, 17. So I am able to graph these corresponding terms based on the two rules that were given. So that was the two standards we're going to be focused on. So it's creating patterns, which we did. We created two patterns going down the T-chart, and we used the two given rules to create those patterns. And the second part was we can use these corresponding terms to create ordered pairs that we can eventually graph. Our second example, again with the same instructions, create patterns using two given rules. Now we have our two patterns I labeled as sequences, because sequences are also patterns. So we have sequence H and we have sequence I. And we have our two rules in green. So same rules apply here. You have your patterns and you have your rules. So we're going to create two patterns using two given rules. So again, for all of this stuff, we're going to make a T-chart. So I'm going to create my T-chart and I'm going to label them H and I. Understanding, again, that this one's going to represent your X and this one's going to represent your Y. All right, so sequence H says start at 0. So it's very important to write that 0 because that is the first term in your sequence. So we start at 0, add 3. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12. So those are the 5. Remember, minimum of 3, and you can go on as long as you want, but I like to have 5 to be safe. All right, and I, our rule is start at 0 and add 6. So 6, 12, 18, 24. Okay, so we have our two patterns and we use two given rules to get those patterns. Now, just to clarify, these also create corresponding terms going across from each other. They are related and these make ordered pairs. So this first one would be 0, 0. This one would be 3, 6. This one would be 6, 12. This one would be 9, 18. This one would be 12, 24. Now, an important thing to understand that I didn't mention in the last example is when you see ordered pairs, order matters. So I cannot have this flip-flop. This is not the same as 6, 3. So if there's a question about ordered pairs, it has to be in the correct order. Always X first, then Y. So if a question came up, is 12, 6 part of this pattern? That answer would be no, because the pattern would have 6, 12. So make sure you stay in the correct order. So we have our two patterns using two given rules and the corresponding terms create ordered pairs. Question number 3. So what I decided to do is work backwards. So what are the rules for the two patterns? So this time I'm going to give you the patterns and you're going to tell me the two rules. Now, if you notice, this looks kind of different. I said make a T-chart. Well, if you notice, this is still a T-chart. I just made the T-chart going sideways so you see both examples. So I have a T-chart going sideways this way, where, again, this one would be the X and this one would be the Y. So it still stays in alphabetical order. So we have two patterns here, and we want to figure out the rules. And these are just working backwards. So I look at these rules and I go, all right, so a rule means here is C. The rules are going to be for each pattern. So pattern C, the rules are just for individual patterns. So if I see here, it's very important to know the starting point. So I see my starting point is 0. So I'm going to start at 0. And then I see what is going on in this pattern. And I'm noticing it's adding by 4 each time. So start at 0, and this pattern is add 4. And then for rule D, or pattern D, so I'm seeing pattern here for D, and it's different. So this one starts at 2. So I'm going to write start at 2, and I look for a pattern here. And this one also, I notice it's adding 4 each time. So add 4. So this example is fairly simple. It's just working backwards. Now I see a pattern and I'm trying to figure out the rules. So what are the rules for the two given patterns? Rule C is start at 0, add 4, and rule D is start at 2 and add 4. Now my fourth and final example is going to be which ordered pair could be created by these rules. So right here we're giving two rules. We're giving rule A and rule B. So, and it says which ordered pair could be created. So we need to create some ordered pairs. Now remember, if we're going to create some ordered pairs, the first thing that should come to your head, what's the best way to do this? And of course, it's going to be a T-chart. So I'm going to create a T-chart here, and I'm going to label it A and B. Now, I'm again going to understand that this one is the X and this one is the Y. Now, let's start with A. A's rule is start at 0. So I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to add 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So I have my 5 numbers for pattern A. So the rule for pattern B is start at 0 and add 8. So I have 8, 16, 24, and 32. And so we have our 2 patterns. So the first part of the standard was create 2 patterns based on given rules. So we did that. We have 2 patterns right here based on these 2 given rules. And the other part is remembering that these corresponding terms make ordered pairs. So we have to understand that this one is 0, 0. This one is 2, 8. This one is 4, 16. This one is 6, 24. And this one is 8, 32. Now, I made this example because I think it's very important to know that order matters. So we're going to look and see which of these choices here would be part of these 2 rules. So which ordered pair could be used to create these rules? Could be created by these rules. So if I look here, I have these choices. So let's look at 8, 2. Is 8, 2 listed here? Well, I see 8, 32, but I do see an 8 and a 2 here. But this one would not be correct because it's not in the correct order. Because this one has 2, then 8. So the pair here is 2, 8. This one's 8, 2. So that one would not work because it's not the correct order. Now, let's look at B, 10, 40. Well, I don't see 10, 40 listed. Well, that's the thing about T-charts. These numbers can go on for forever. So if I was to continue this chart, would I eventually get 10 and 40? So let's look here. I have counting by 2. So if I added a 2 again, I would get my 10. And if I added 8 here, I would get my 40. So I would see 10, 40 on this T-chart. Now, would 410 be here? Well, I have 416, so no, 410 would not be here. Would 1016 be here? The answer, again, if you look, we already had 1040, so there's no way that this could be 1016. And would we have 624? If I made my T-chart correctly, I see 624 right here. So, which ordered pair could be created by these rules? So, and the answer is going to be B, which is 1040, and E, which is 624.